In the year 1590, a ship finally returned to a remote island on the coast of North America. 3 years earlier, more than 100 English settlers had built a small colony there. They had homes, families, and dreams of building a new life in the New World. But when the ship arrived, something was terribly wrong. The settlement was completely empty. No people, no bodies, no signs of battle. The only clue was a strange word carved into a wooden post. What happened to the settlers of Roanoke? Did they starve? Were they killed? Or did they simply disappear into the wilderness? For more than 400 years, historians have searched for answers. This is the story of the lost colony of Roanoke, one of the most mysterious disappearances in history. To understand Roanoke, we need to travel back to the late 1500s. Europe was in the middle of the age of exploration. Powerful nations were racing across the oceans to claim new lands. Spain had already built a massive empire in the Americas. Gold and silver were flowing back to Europe from Spanish colonies. England did not want to be left behind. The English crown, led by Elizabeth I, wanted to establish colonies in the New World for trade, power, and strategic advantage. One of the most ambitious men supporting this idea was Walter Raleigh. Raleigh believed England needed its own American colony, so he began planning an expedition to explore the eastern coast of North America. In 1584, English explorers sailed across the Atlantic Ocean and reached the coast of what is now North Carolina. They discovered a small island surrounded by water and forests. This island was called Roanoke Island. At first glance, Roanoke seemed perfect. The land was fertile. The rivers were full of fish. The forests were filled with animals. Even better, the island was far away from Spanish colonies. The explorers returned to England with exciting reports. They told Raleigh that the land was beautiful and full of opportunity. Soon, plans were made to build England's first permanent colony in North America. In 1585, the first English settlers arrived at Roanoke. However, this colony was very different from the one that would come later. The settlers were mostly soldiers and explorers. They were not farmers or families. At first, they tried to build relationships with nearby Native American tribes. Some tribes were friendly and helped them learn how to fish and grow food. But misunderstandings quickly created tension. Language barriers made communication difficult, and the English settlers often demanded food and supplies. Eventually, conflicts began. Food shortages also became a serious problem. The settlers had not brought enough supplies from England, and they were not prepared for the harsh conditions of the New World. After about 1 year, the first Roanoke colony collapsed. Many settlers returned to England. For a moment, it seemed like England's dream of colonizing America had failed. But Raleigh was not ready to give up. In 1587, Raleigh organized a second expedition. This time, the settlers were different. Instead of soldiers, the group included families. Men, women, and children traveled across the Atlantic. Their goal was not exploration. Their goal was to build a permanent home. The leader of the expedition was John White. White was an artist and explorer who had visited the region before. He believed the settlers could survive if they worked together. In total, 115 colonists arrived at Roanoke Island. Among them was John White's daughter, and soon his granddaughter would be born there. Only weeks after the settlers arrived, something historic happened. A baby girl was born. Her name was Virginia Dare. She became the first English child born in the New World. The birth of Virginia Dare was a hopeful moment. It symbolized a new beginning. For the settlers, it meant that their colony was becoming a true community. Homes were built, fields were planted. Families began to imagine a future in America. But danger was never far away. The settlers soon realized that survival would not be easy. Supplies were running low. The colony needed more food, tools, and equipment. Relations with nearby native tribes were also fragile. Some tribes were willing to trade. Others were angry about the arrival of English settlers. Conflicts from the earlier colony had not been forgotten. The settlers depended heavily on support from England. Without supplies, they could not survive long. Governor John White knew the colony needed help, so he made a difficult decision. He would sail back to England and bring supplies. White promised to return quickly, but fate had other plans. Soon after White reached England, a massive war broke out between England and Spain. The Spanish Armada threatened England itself. Because of the war, almost every ship was needed for defense. White was unable to return to Roanoke. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. For 3 long years, the colonists waited for help that never came. Finally, in 1590, John White managed to secure a ship and sail back to America. He was excited to see his family again. He especially hoped to meet his granddaughter Virginia Dare, who was now 3 years old. But when the ship arrived at Roanoke Island, the crew immediately noticed something strange. The colony looked abandoned. The houses were empty. The buildings were slowly collapsing. There were no people anywhere. The entire colony had vanished. As the explorers searched the settlement, they found a mysterious clue. Carved into a wooden post was the word Croatoan. Nearby, they also saw the letters CRO carved into a tree. White remembered something important. Before leaving, he had told the settlers that if they moved somewhere else, they should carve the name of the new location. The word Croatoan referred to a nearby island where a friendly native tribe lived. White believed the settlers might have moved there, but a violent storm prevented the ship from sailing to the island. The crew was forced to return to England. The fate of the colony remained unknown. When John White finally returned to the shores of Roanoke in 1590, he expected to reunite with his family. 3 years earlier, he had left behind 115 English settlers. Among them were his daughter Eleanor Dare and his newborn granddaughter Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the New World. But what he found instead was silence. The settlement was completely abandoned. No bodies, no signs of violence, no desperate messages, just a single mysterious word carved into a wooden post: Croatoan. For centuries, historians have asked the same question. Where did the colonists go? One of the most widely accepted theories is that the settlers moved to Croatoan Island, located about 50 miles south of Roanoke. Unlike other tribes in the region, the Croatoan people had friendly relations with the English. The settlers had traded with them before. They shared food. They exchanged knowledge. Because of this relationship, historians believe the colonists may have sought refuge there when conditions at Roanoke became too difficult. If their supplies ran out or conflicts increased, moving to Croatoan would have been their safest option. Unfortunately, John White never reached Croatoan Island to confirm this theory. Storms and war forced his ship to return to England. Over the years, explorers reported strange observations among Native American tribes in the region. Some tribes claimed their ancestors included white settlers. Others described stories of people who spoke broken English generations earlier. Even more intriguing were physical traits noticed by explorers: gray or blue eyes, lighter hair colors, European facial features. These characteristics led some historians to believe the Roanoke colonists intermarried with local tribes. They simply became part of another culture. Another possibility suggests the settlers moved inland. Life on Roanoke Island was incredibly harsh. Food shortages were common. Relations with some tribes were tense. Instead of staying on the vulnerable coast, the colonists may have moved deeper into the mainland in search of fertile land and safer territory. Archaeologists have discovered English-style tools, pottery fragments, and metal objects in inland areas dating back to the late 1500s. These discoveries suggest that small groups of settlers may have attempted to establish new settlements away from the coast. However, survival in the wilderness was extremely difficult. Without steady supplies from England, many of them may not have survived long. At the time, England and Spain were fierce rivals. Spain dominated much of the New World and viewed English colonies as a threat. Some historians have proposed that Spanish forces destroyed the Roanoke colony. Spanish troops had the military power to wipe out a small settlement like Roanoke. However, historians have found no Spanish records confirming such an attack. Spain was known for documenting victories against rivals. If they had destroyed Roanoke, they likely would have recorded it. Because of this lack of evidence, most experts consider this theory unlikely. Perhaps the most tragic explanation is also the simplest. The settlers may have simply failed to survive. The late 1500s were a brutal time for colonists in the New World. They faced starvation, harsh winters, unfamiliar diseases, hostile environments. Without consistent supplies from England, survival became nearly impossible. The colonists may have split into small groups searching for food and shelter. Over time, they could have died from hunger, illness, or conflict. If this happened gradually, it might explain why no clear evidence of disaster was left behind. Even today, researchers continue searching for answers. Archaeologists use modern technology such as ground-penetrating radar, DNA analysis, satellite mapping. In recent years, some artifacts believed to be connected to the Roanoke settlers have been discovered in areas far from the original colony. The disappearance of Roanoke Colony is one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. Unlike many historical tragedies, this story has no clear ending, no battlefield, no mass grave, just a vanished community and a single carved word. That uncertainty has fascinated historians for over 400 years. Although the colony disappeared, its story had a lasting impact. When English settlers later founded Jamestown in 1607, they learned from Roanoke's failure. They brought more supplies, they sent more soldiers, they planned more carefully. Jamestown eventually became the first permanent English settlement, but the shadow of Roanoke remained. A reminder of how dangerous the New World could be. Somewhere in the forests, rivers, and coastal lands of early America, the fate of those 115 settlers is hidden. Maybe they found a new home. Maybe they moved inland. Or maybe their story ended quietly in the wilderness. Whatever the truth may be, the lost colony of Roanoke remains one of history's greatest unanswered questions. And perhaps one day, a new discovery will finally reveal what happened to the colony that simply disappeared.